Hey there, and welcome back to ClearPath Conversations. I'm Mark Bernardin. In the last episode, we talked about customer success metrics that actually matter. We cut through the vanity numbers, the dashboards that look pretty but don't actually tell you anything useful, and we focused on the metrics that really drive retention, expansion, and advocacy. If you missed that one, go back and listen because understanding what to measure is foundational to everything that we're about to talk about today. Uh, because here's the thing, you can track every metric perfectly. You can have beautiful health scores. You can run your Gainsight instance like a well-oiled machine and still not be a great CSM. Because greatness in this role isn't about dashboards. It's about behavior. It's about how you show up when the dashboard says everything's fine and something in your gut tells you that it's not. It's about what you do when no one's watching, when no one's measuring, and when the easy move is to just let it slide. So today, to close out this strategy series, I want to get personal. I want to share the traits and habits that I believe separate good CSMs from great ones. Uh, These aren't theoretical. They come from over a decade of managing enterprise portfolios in cybersecurity SaaS, from working with customers like Ernst Young, Lowe's, Accenture, Home Depot, from building recovery frameworks that have saved millions in ARR, and from mentoring CSMs who went on to become, quite frankly, some of the strongest operators that I've ever worked alongside. This is my list. It's opinionated, and I stand behind every item on it. Let's um, let's start with the one that I feel matters the most, and that's ownership. I've I've written about this in the CSM's personal playbook, in the Path to Green, in CSM's boot camp. It shows up in almost everything that I teach because it's the single biggest differentiator between a CSM who manages accounts and a CSM who transforms accounts. Ownership means you don't wait to be told what's wrong. You already know. You've already been watching those signals. You've already mapped the stakeholders. You've already built a plan before anyone asks you for one. Here's here's what that looks like. Customer reports that a critical feature isn't working the way that they expected. Now, a CSM without ownership forwards that ticket to support and they just move on. A CSM with ownership stays involved. They follow up on the resolution timeline. They communicate proactively with the customer about the progress. They identify workarounds in the meantime. And when the issue is resolved, they circle back to confirm that everything is working and ask what they can do to prevent something like this happening in the future. Customers notice that. That investment builds trust faster than any slide deck ever could. At Palo Alto Networks, I treated every account like It was my business to run. Nobody had to tell me to check on a renewal risk. Nobody had asked me to prepare for a stakeholder shift. I was already ahead of it. That's ownership. Now, here's the part that people miss. Ownership doesn't mean that you own everything. You don't own the product roadmap. You don't own the support queue, the implementation timeline. You own the narrative, the communication, the relationship, and you own the plan. When you confuse ownership with control, you start making promises that you can't keep. And that's how trust erodes. The second non-negotiable is curiosity. Not curiosity in some abstract feel-good kind of way. I mean the relentless operational kind that drives you to understand your customers' usage and why it dipped last month. The kind that makes you read their press releases before you have a meeting with them. The kind that has you scanning their job postings to understand where they're growing, checking LinkedIn to see who just joined their team, and asking questions that go way beyond the product. A, a curious CSM doesn't take requests at face value. When a customer mentions they're restructuring their team, a curious CSM asks what's driving that change, and how it affects their priorities and what success looks like in the new structure. That context reveals opportunities and risks that you would have missed otherwise. The best CSMs I've ever worked with aren't satisfied just knowing that the customer logged into the platform. They want to know whether the login led to value. Did this feature reduce their time to resolution? Did it help prevent a breach? They're driven by impact, not activity. Curiosity is also what fuels expansion. Some of the best opportunities I've identified came from simply staying curious about what the customer was dealing with beyond our platform. At one account, that curiosity led to an expansion that doubled the contract value to $24,000 because we discovered a use case that they really hadn't even considered. That kind of growth doesn't come from a playbook. It comes from asking the right questions at the right time. And curiosity isn't limited to your customers. The CSMs who understand how their product team prioritizes the roadmap, how their sales team structures deals, and how their support team triages tickets can navigate cross-functional dynamics without getting stuck in bottlenecks. They understand the levers that they can pull and also the ones that they can't. And that knowledge makes them dramatically more effective. Number 3 is calm under pressure. I earned the nickname the at-risk whisperer, not because I had some secret formula, but because I could walk into a room where everyone was escalating their tone and I would slow down. I would I would lower my voice. I would focus on facts instead of feelings. And that changed the entire dynamic of the conversation. In the path to green, I lay out the 4 non-negotiables of the turnaround specialist mindset, which are calm, clarity, credibility, and consistency. Calm is that's first for a reason. In the middle of the storm, you signal stability. During one high-profile recovery, I deliberately slowed my speaking pace and focused entirely on fact-based updates. That single behavioral shift reduced the emotional escalation on the customer side and gave us the space to actually solve the problem. Now, this this is something that I first discovered and developed through a course that I took years ago with the late Dr. George J. Thompson called Verbal Judo. The premise was simple, but it was powerful. Control the situation by controlling yourself and guide conversations toward cooperation instead of conflict. The skills that I learned in that course taught me how to stay composed under pressure and diffuse tense conversations before they derailed an entire recovery effort. So, if you're serious about a career in customer success, add verbal judo to your reading list. The customer is already stressed when they walk into that meeting. They've rehearsed their grievances. So if you match their energy, you escalate. But if you walk in calm, prepared, and solution oriented, you shift the conversation from confrontation to collaboration. And that shift is where recoveries began. Now, number 4 is follow through. Now, this one might sound basic, but it's where most CSMs fall apart. Let me tell you about a situation that taught me this lesson permanently. Early in my career, I was managing an account that was healthy by every measure. Good usage, strong relationship, no escalations. After a routine check-in call, the customer's IT director asked me to send over some integration documentation by the end of the week. Just a simple ask. 5 minutes of work. I said, absolutely, have it to you by Friday. Friday came. I was buried in an escalation on a different account. I told myself I'd send it Monday. Monday turned into Wednesday. By the time I sent it, the IT director had already pulled the documentation himself. And he opened our next call with, I wasn't sure if you forgot or if you just didn't prioritize us. That sentence hit hard because he was right. It wasn't that I couldn't do it. I let it slip. And in doing so, I told that customer something about how much I valued their time. That moment changed how I operated. From that moment forward, I built systems, in the CSM's personal playbook, I dedicate an entire section to commitment tracking because of experiences just like that one. The, the core insight is this: your brain was not designed to be a task management system. Human working memory handles about 7 items reliably, but customer success requires managing hundreds of tasks across dozens of accounts. You need external infrastructure that captures, organizes, and tracks every commitment automatically. Every commitment you make needs 4 elements: what you promised, who you promised it to, when it's due, and what done looks like. If any of those is missing, you're just setting yourself up to drop the ball. Now, when you miss a small commitment, the customer starts wondering what else you're going to miss. That doubt, once it takes hold, is incredibly hard to get back. In a world where most professionals overpromise and underdeliver, systematic reliability is a massive competitive advantage. CSMs who never miss commitments build the kind of trust that enables deeper relationships, more honest conversations, and more successful negotiations. That's not a soft skill. That's a business outcome. Now, number five is strategic thinking. Too many CSMs operate in purely reactive mode. The loudest customer gets the most attention. The most urgent ticket gets the fastest response. And at the end of the week, you've been busy every single day, but you haven't moved anything forward. A great CSM thinks like a business owner. They know their accounts inside and out. They track renewal dates before anyone reminds them. They spend time where it matters most, not just where the noise is the loudest. In CSM Bootcamp, I talk about building portfolio strategies that prioritize based on business impact, on relationship risk, and on growth potential. That kind of prioritization requires you to step back, look at the bigger picture, and make deliberate decisions about where your time goes. It's the difference between getting surprised by a churn risk and seeing it coming 5-6 months in advance. It's the difference between scrambling to build an EBR deck the night before and having a narrative prepared 3 weeks out because you've been tracking the story all quarter long. Let me give you a specific example. At Palo Alto Networks, I had an enterprise customer whose primary champion had just been promoted into a new division. On paper, nothing had changed. Health score was green, usage was stable, and no open escalations. Most CSMs would have just looked at that dashboard and moved on to something louder. But I knew what was about to happen. A champion moving to a new division meant someone new was going to inherit the relationship. And that person wouldn't have the same context, the same trust, or the same investment in our partnership. I also knew their renewal was about 5 months out. So instead of waiting for the situation to deteriorate, I reached out to the outgoing champion, asked for an introduction to their successor. I scheduled a rediscovery call to understand the new stakeholders' priorities. and updated the account success plan before anyone internally even flagged the transition. By the time the renewal conversation started, I already had a relationship with the new decision maker. I understood their goals, and I had a narrative prepared that connected our value to their priorities, not the old champion's priorities. That renewal closed on time and with an expansion. It happened because I saw the risk about 6 months before it would have shown up on a dashboard. That's how I was able to deliver results like the 18,000, 47,000, and $85,000 expansions across my career, not from luck, from strategic account planning. Strategic thinking also means knowing when to invest and when to step back. Not every account can be saved at any cost. Part of being strategic is recognizing where your time will have the greatest impact and having the discipline to allocate accordingly. That's not giving up. That's triage. And the best CSMs I know can tell the difference between a customer who needs more support and one who simply isn't a good fit for the product or the partnership. Number 6 is emotional intelligence. A great CSM reads between the lines. They can tell when someone's getting frustrated before anyone says it out loud. They can sense when a team is distracted, when a champion is losing influence internally, or when a stakeholder is starting to disengage. You're on a quarterly review call and your main contact keeps checking their phone, gives short answers, and seems distracted. A CSM without emotional intelligence just plows through the agenda and marks the meeting complete. A CSM with emotional intelligence pauses and says, I can tell you have a lot competing for your attention today. Should we reschedule so we can give this the focus that it deserves? That kind of acknowledgement often opens the door to a much more honest conversation. Maybe they're dealing with a budget crisis. Maybe they're frustrated with something about the product that they haven't brought up yet. You don't get to any of that if you just barrel through the slides. Emotional intelligence also protects you. This role gives a lot emotionally. You're absorbing customer frustration, navigating internal politics, and managing expectations in every direction. If you don't have the self-awareness to recognize when you're running on empty, you're going to burn out. Resilience and the ability to recharge aren't optional. They are what allow you to keep showing up at the level that your customers need. And the 7th non-negotiable is storytelling. Now, you might not think of storytelling as a core CSM skill, but it determines how your work gets perceived. Whether you're building an EBR, writing a get well plan, or advocating for a customer's feature request, you're constantly turning data and context into a narrative that moves people into action. Now, in the executive business review playbook, I walk through exactly how to build that narrative arc. It's not about cramming data into slides. It's about telling the story of the partnership, where we started, what we've accomplished, where we're headed, and what we need from each other to get there. And storytelling isn't just for customer-facing work. It's how you advocate internally. When I needed engineering resources for a critical recovery, I didn't send a Jira ticket and just hope for the best. I told the story. I painted the picture of what the customer was experiencing, what the business impact was, and what we stood to lose if we didn't act. That's what gets people to move. It's also how you document your own impact. When I built my recovery portfolio, the storytelling discipline is what made it effective. It wasn't just a list of accounts that I'd worked on, it was a collection of narratives. Here's what the account was. Here's what I did. Here's what changed. And here's the measurable result. Time to health, ARR saved, expansion revenue generated. When I presented that portfolio, it showed that my success wasn't situational, it was systematic. Your ability to tell that story, to quantify outcomes and build a narrative around them is what determines how your work is perceived. Not the work itself, the story you tell about it. So let me bring this together. 7 non-negotiables: ownership, curiosity, calm under pressure, follow through, strategic thinking, emotional intelligence, and storytelling. None of these, not one, require a certification, a specific tool, or a title. They're choices you make every single day about how you approach the work. You don't have to be perfect at all 7 right now. Nobody is. But if you're honest about where you're strong and where you need to grow, and you commit to improving one at a time, you'll separate yourself from the pack. Not because you have a fancier portfolio, but because you approach the work differently. I've managed portfolios worth over $8.5 million in ARR. I've turned accounts around that other people had written off. And in every one of those situations, the difference came down to these fundamentals. Not a tool, not a process, these fundamentals. When I mentored those 7 CSMs at Palo Alto during our manager's leave, the thing I focused on most wasn't tools or processes, it was mindset. I wanted each of them to understand that they weren't just account managers filling a seat. They were strategic operators with the ability to influence outcomes, to protect revenue, and build relationships that would outlast any single product cycle. Because once you adopt these non-negotiables as your operating standard, everything else follows. Now, everything we talked about today, ownership, strategic thinking, proactive planning, seeing risk before it shows up on a report dashboard, all of it points to the same underlying question. How do you know whether an account will actually hold up under pressure? That question is exactly what the next series is built around. In the next episode, we're going to introduce a framework that I built called the Program Resiliency Plan, the PRP. It's a structural assessment model designed to answer one question: would this account remain stable if conditions changed tomorrow? Not whether the health score is green, not whether the customer attended the last QPR, whether the account would hold if a champion left, if a budget shifted, or if leadership changed. We're going to talk about what most CS teams measure, why that measurement is incomplete, and what it means to assess survivability instead of activity. And I'll walk through a real account example that shows the difference between an account that looks healthy and one that actually is. Now, that's our next episode, episode 28. And from there, we're going to run the full PRP mini-series, the 30-day execution cycle, how the ownership model changes when a PRP is active, and how the PRP fits alongside the account success plans that you're already running. If you've ever had an account that felt fine right up to the point that it didn't, this series is going to change how you think about your entire portfolio. Now, the companion download for today's episode, the Non-Negotiables Self-Assessment and Action Planner, is available at clearpathcx.com. Work through it, and work through it honestly. It will show you where you're strong and where the gap is. Remember to follow the show on your favorite platform. Connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Mark Bernardin. And if one of these non-negotiables hit close to home today, I'd love to hear which one. Drop me a message. I read every one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for showing up and delivering every single day. I'll talk to you soon.